And how would you describe your leadership style?
So I'm not a leader that needs to be upfront all the time. I certainly can be. I think the word servant leader would probably be something that I'd use to describe myself. I like to listen. I like to learn from others. I know being the CEO gives you a positional sort of responsibility or authority, but that doesn't mean you have all the answers by any stretch. And so I've always made it a point of listening to others and asking people for their advice. I don't put on airs of self-importance. I like to be vulnerable, and I am vulnerable, and humble. I appreciate the opportunity I've had in all of my positions, and they've all been great learning opportunities for me, and the ability for me to contribute to driving results.
What has really stood out for me in terms of your leadership has been the fact that you would come to the lunchroom and try to have lunch with your staff there and connect with them. When did you start doing this, and why did you start doing this? And how difficult has it been to keep doing this on a regular basis with the other pressures at work?
So it's a good question. I've always wanted to build relationships with people in organizations that I've worked, and I've always found a great way to do that is to actually go and break bread with people and learn about what's going on in their work lives and their home lives and build that relationship. So I've been doing it for many years, and it's always amazing to me the stuff that you pick up both professionally as well as personally. I think about, I know I had lunch with you a number of times and learned all kinds of stuff. And as a result of that relationship, when you reached out about this project, we were able just to connect. And so I find it really, people are interesting. I guess the other thing I'd say is, I'm like everybody else, I need to eat. And so eating lunch is something I made time for. Not every day, obviously, but when I could, when time permitted, and when I was in the office. As you know, lots of days I was on the road, especially in the regional lead capacity. So to the extent I can, I try to do that. And as I said, you learn so much about staff, about different parts of the system. It's also something I've done with providers that we fund, is go to their work locations, whether it's a long-term care home or community support service agency or hospital. There's the expression, go to Gemba, go to where the work is.
Right.
And from that, you can learn all kinds of new things and pressures that they're having. And then, I remember when I first started doing the visits and I would come back from a long-term care home that was experiencing some kind of pressure related to whatever, and I would ask staff to figure out something that we could do to support them. So it demonstrated to, I think, a lot of providers that I wasn't just coming out to see them, but I was actually wanting to help them. That's the same thing with having lunch with staff. How can I help you?
Yeah, it's that human connection, the interest in. And do you have any advice for leaders who, these days with so much going on, their days are packed with work that is extending way past their regular working schedule? How can they make time for their staff, their people, to really connect with them?
Well, it's obviously different now, right? With Zoom and whatever. I think one of the things that a number of organizations that I've talked to over the last number of months have been doing is sort of wellness checks with their staff, and actually having a specific Zoom meeting to just see how, whether it's one-on-one or one-to-many, just seeing how people are doing mentally and how they're coping with the extraordinary volume of work that they're faced with through the pandemic. Some people are really good at working from home. Some people can't work from home. So they have other pressures and concerns about actually having to go into an acute care facility or a long-term care home. putting themselves and their families at risk. So how are they coping? So I think that would be something that I suggest people do until there's the opportunity for us to get back together and face to face in real life.
And how does one build an ideal team around themselves? Is there one question you always ask someone you were going to be, hiring for your team?
The one thing that came to mind is, what is it that I would do that would drive you crazy in being your supervisor, if you would? A lot of the time the answer to that question is micromanagement. And so that's always something I've tried to ensure that I don't do. Would be clear on the what and the how. And I think the other area where it's helpful is to understand your strengths and weaknesses is through a good performance management system that includes both the assessment of your objectives. Did you achieve your objectives and the SMART metrics around them, and then the 360, which would get feedback from your staff, your peers, other leaders in the system to give you honest feedback about how are you doing, and that allows you to identify opportunities to really focus on areas that may be a weakness. So I think that would be the 360s in particular on the how is a helpful thing.
Yeah. And when do you know when it's time to let someone go from your team if they're not, a good fit, or they're not performing to the level that you had initially expected? How do you make that decision?
Yeah, those are probably the hardest decisions to make because any way you look at it, you're affecting people's lives. Loss of employment is really difficult on lots of people, lots of change. So it needs to really come to a head. And for me, the thing that usually is the deciding point is around how people are doing their work, not necessarily the work they're doing. They may be doing something that's, disloyal or untruthful, and or just not being kind, basically, to colleagues and or providers, patients, and that's usually what is the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, for me.